Okay, can you hear me? We've already solved everything up here. I know it's after 10, but we're done. So let me just kind of set our tone for what we're doing. This is mostly for question and answer. You're free to ask a question, any question at all. It doesn't matter what it is. You come to the microphone. Pete's going to record this for us today, so we'll be able to have it and watch it. If it turns ugly, you can put it on YouTube, and maybe you'll make some money. We're going to say a prayer, and I'm going to give you the briefest kind of background I can on where we are, and then let you ask questions. But you'll have to come to the microphone, okay, so we can hear you. Otherwise, you might be a loud voice, but I might not be able to hear you up here, and somebody out there might not either. So come to the microphone with your question. And then we'll do our best to answer the questions as straightforward as we can, okay? There's a couple of things to know. Despite what other clergy and other churches might be doing, the clergy in this don't have a vote. The clergy are not members of the church. The clergy are members of the annual conference. So none of the pastors anywhere in the United Methodist Church are members of the church. They're all members of their annual conference, okay? So we do not have a vote on this whole thing, all right? The vote that we take about our future has to be 2/3 of the people present, okay? 2/3 vote. And the vote can only be voted, or you can only vote if you're a professing member of one of the churches. All right? So you have to be a member of First Church or Liberty in order to vote. And we all vote as one because we are, under the United Methodist Church, we are one charge. We're one group together. So we're linked together as basically, in the eyes of the Methodist Church, one whole unit, one whole church. So we'll all vote together when we vote, okay? We would probably be looking at ideally a time frame of mid to late September or early to mid-October to have that vote in order to be ahead of the called annual conference that happens at the end of the year. What happens, two things will happen at that called annual conference. One, all churches who have decided to disaffiliate from the UMC will be voted on and, in theory, approved by the annual conference. And then the second half of that annual conference, we get to figure out how to realign what's left of the churches that stay UMC. And that'll be a process ongoing, I'm sure, for a long time, okay? There's a lot of information here. Trust me, I'm trying to swim with this all the time to keep up with it. So please don't be shy. If you still leave here confused, ask me questions or ask any of these guys questions. We're more than happy to answer. I think the best thing we can do is give you as much information as possible until you have it, okay? Just know that it's a changing thing. There are certain questions we can't answer because we don't know. It's going to have to happen in the future, and we'll just have to wait and see, okay? All right? Fair enough? So I asked David if he wanted to lead us in a really super nice, heavy prayer, but I'm not sure he was really serious, so I'm going to lead us in a super nice, heavy prayer, okay, to get started, and then we'll go on, okay? All right, so let's pray. God, it's a sorrowful thing that we've arrived at this point in our lives in the church, but we all must remember that you have not changed. You are still God. You are still with us. You are still more powerful than anything on earth or in heaven. You are still guiding your church, which is always going to be there. The remnant of always be present around us. So my prayer is, Lord, that we can all remember that and trust that being your church is what matters, that following you in this life is what matters, and that the things we do and the decisions we make are made with that in mind, that we can be the body of Christ, that we can be Christ-like in our thoughts and our prayers, in how we serve you and how we follow you. I pray for you to be with us, to guide us with wisdom and grace, I pray that you would pour your Spirit out upon us so that we can be inspired to hear and to listen and to grow and to learn. And I ask for your blessing on our time, and I pray this in Christ's holy name. Amen. All right. A lot of you are going to ask the question, how do we get to this point? Which is probably the question that everybody wants to know the most, and probably the most irrelevant question. The fact is, we're here. I can answer that question for you if you want. It's probably not what you think. The media is not doing us any favors because they're doing a lot of hearsay stuff, not factual stuff. Your most important question for many of you is, why are we having to decide this instead of, or let me rephrase that. Many people have asked the question, why are the conservatives being forced with this question of leaving? Why aren't the liberals leaving? Okay? Well, we didn't start off that way. That's what you need to understand. We started off as the conservatives in the United Methodist Church, opening the window for the liberal churches to leave by disaffiliating. And through time, the tables turned on us. There was a vote at annual conference to try to make it even easier now for the conservative churches to leave, and the conference voted it down because the initial motion and the initial move was for the conservative church to make it where the liberal church could leave, and they weren't too concerned about being easy about it. But now the tables have turned, and it's the conservatives who are trying to leave, and they're operating under the same rules that the liberals had to before, okay? You can ask me more about that if you want to. The question is, for every United Methodist Church now, are you going to go? And the number one option to go to is the global United Methodist Church. Are you going to go independent and just be your own independent congregation? Or are you going to stay and be a United Methodist Church from here on out? Those are really the three options. If you choose the global church, we have a pretty good idea what we're going to get there, at least so far. There's changes happening there. If you choose the independent route, that could be all kinds of things. That could be, we just decide we're going to be one church together by ourselves here. We could become a Lutheran. We could become a Presbyterian. We could become a Wesleyan. We could pick our option, whatever we choose as an independent path, okay? And if we stay at UMC, we don't have to do anything. Just go on and do our thing, okay? Anything else I need to, as far as preference or preface? Yes. Everything that we're going to cover is on the website. And a lot of people have told me they don't go to the website. Well, go to the website because you can see up here on the left-hand column, and you may not be able to see because the writing's small, but you go onto our website on the very front page on the left-hand column, that black sidebar is a link. And in that link is every kind of document that I thought would be important to put in there. A comparison chart between the global and the UMC, the paragraphs that printed out of paragraphs of disaffiliation from the Book of Discipline. Very important that you read those because it's going to answer a lot of questions for you that are very important to you. Okay? There's more on there, of course. There's plenty, ample, if you'd like to go in there and read. There's a lot there.
Let me offer one thing. If you don't have access to the internet and you'd like to see this information, if you'll let us know, we can get you what you need. So just be aware. We want you to know if you don't have access, okay?
If you don't have access to the internet, if you want to give me your email address or if you're just going to give me your name and your mailing address, I will print it and send it to you because I have it all on my computer ready to go. Okay? All right. Who wants to throw the first question? Right. Come on up, John. We got John and then John. First two questions.
Being an old professor, you gave 3 terms, and I think you need to define them for the group. You gave the first 2 terms politically, conservative and liberal. You use those 2 terms first. Think you need to define those 2. not from the political situation, but from the church. And number two, I think the congregation need to know, define independent and global. That's all I need.
Okay. We'll get a lot of questions about the global church. The comparison chart that's on the website is very useful. The global church's goal is to be the home of orthodoxy, okay? Their goal is to be the conservative church that they believe we ought to be, where the Bible is your fundamental and only source of your basis for existence. But that's the same thing that the UMC would say and anybody else would say. The questions on making decisions about where to go, I think, are more about the future, and that's not quite as clear. So right now, for example, the global church is forming under the comparison chart. It's very useful. It's forming under this orthodoxy kind of umbrella. But on the question of whether or not they would be allowed to have gay clergy, non-practicing, they'd have to be non-practicing gay clergy, the global church's stance right now is yes, that's allowed. Same as the United Methodist Church. This exact same rule. We can have gay clergy right now, but they can't be practicing. They have to be non-practicing, not in your face about it. Same thing for the global church. The global church is going to hold church members accountable. As I was saying to these guys, I can't just willy-nilly, even though there have been times I wanted to, remove a church member from the membership of the church. You cannot do that in the United Methodist Church. So you can have the worst, most obnoxious, hateful person coming to church, but if they're coming to church, you can't just remove them. You cannot do it. In the global church, you can. So buyer beware. If you're global and you're not behaving like you're supposed to in the church, they'll just boot you. So the global church is not going to give you any more say about who your clergy person is than the UMC does. You know, one of the biggest complaints in the congregations that I've been a part of, they wanted more control over who they got as their pastor. You're not going to get that either way. You will get that more than you bargained for if you go independent. Because if you're an independent church, you have to come up with your own clergy. You have to find them, interview them, right? Review them, hear them preach. You'd be basically like First Baptist does when they have to find a new pastor. You'll have to have a pastor search committee that goes out and searches and finds the pastor you want. If we realign to another denomination, we would have to adhere to their rules, right? So if it's Presbyterian, you're going to have a little Calvinistic bent to whatever it is that's their rules, etc. You can find out all that information online. You know, I'm not going to try to cover every possible denomination. The big question is, the reason people want to bail now is because they don't know what the future is going to be. In 2024, when we have General Conference, it's very possible that the rules of the United Methodist Church will change. It's also very possible that they will not change at all. That's a gamble that we have to take. The rules of the global church will change, almost certainly will change in 2023 when they have a conference, and in 2024 when they have another conference. We don't know what that'll be. I don't know that they do either. So the global church is where people are flocking to the most. I can say that, I think, comfortably, because they want to be in that conservative group where they believe that these issues we're facing in the United Methodist Church they won't face, which I believe is a mistake. I believe they will face those issues, just a matter of time before they do. Okay? The Southern Baptist Church is facing it now. They will continue. In the United States of America, young people, that's not going away. They're going to face that issue. Okay? Think I answered that question, John? Yeah, the global church is definitely going to be the conservative path for now. Independent churches, we would be whatever we're going to define ourselves to be, especially if we're just independent by ourselves without any influence from any other party. The question on everybody's mind is what's going to happen to the United Methodist Church. Are we going to swing violently to the left and become a very liberal church, or are we not? And if you've heard me talk about this before, you probably heard me say that what happens to the United Methodist Church in the whole big picture isn't really going to necessarily affect us one way or the other. I don't see that happening in Quitman, Texas, or Hawkins, or Mineola. Or, I don't see that happening in our area for many, many years to come. I don't think it'll affect us at all. One of the questions somebody asked me was, what if somebody comes to you and says, they're gay and they want you to do their marriage? Well, that mistake, thinking that I have to marry somebody is a mistake. I don't have to marry anybody that I want to marry. And if I see anything wrong with the wedding, if you're a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, or if you're, a couple I've known has been fighting like cats and dogs, I'm not going to do your wedding. I'll send you to a JP or somebody else, but I'm not going to do it. So I don't have to do it. I'm not forced to do anything. Okay? Just means if they approve that someday down the road, that means that it's going to be okay. It means I won't be brought up on charges if I do it. It means I won't lose my ordination if I do it. Okay? That's all that means. I don't have to do it, and I probably wouldn't. Okay? John, what's your question?
I actually have two questions, if I can get two for the price of one here. One of them is, I believe in order to make an informed, educated decision about which way to go here, we need to know how much money it's going to cost us. I talked with a leader of another Methodist church nearby, and they're in the same stage of discernment we are. And we had quite a long discussion, very interesting discussion. They know, I don't know how they know it will cost them $300,000 if they leave the Methodist Church. So it's going to cost us something, we know that, but I think we need to know what that is, how to compute it. That's question number one. The other question has to do with information on which to base a decision. I've spoken with my sister about this quite a bit. She's a member of a large Methodist church in Friendswood. They're going through discernment as we are. And she sent me 6 videos that were made by a minister by the name of Rob Renfro. I don't know if anybody has seen those or not, but Rob Renfro explains himself as being a lifelong Methodist, a 40-year Methodist minister, and he doesn't list pros and cons for each side. He makes no attempt at some kind of a balanced approach like that. He says very declaratively that in order to continue his principles and his philosophy that the Methodist Church has adhered to for 150 years, he must leave the Methodist Church. And he is trying to convince us all that that's what we need to do. I think I haven't seen all his videos, but I've seen a few of them, and I believe we should all view those videos. I strongly recommend that. For our church, I would like to see us do it during our Sunday school sessions over the next month. There are 6 of them. We could easily see 2 each Sunday and space them out and be done by the middle of September. And I think these would help us immensely. And one thing that he stressed is that the sexuality issue is not the issue at all. It's not the main issue. It's not even the most important issue. It's the interpretation of the Bible, of the Jesus being the Son of God and the Holy Spirit, and he covers those in his videos. And I think we need to know, especially because of what we discussed before, Mike, with you, and what you said this morning about the liberalness of the Methodist Church catching up with us locally. It might be years, and I understand that. However, the basic doctrine of the Methodist Church is liable to go through a great upheaval, the rewriting of the Book of Discipline, and a lot of other things that conservatives would simply not be content with. So I highly recommend that we all see these 6 videos made by Rob Renfro over the course of the next month.
I should have mentioned that another source for information and the videos and other things also on the Texas Annual Conference website, txcumc.org. There's plenty there. And Rob Renfro has long been a source of information on the global church, and there's a reason for that. Rob Renfro is from the Woodlands UMC, but Rob Renfro is also one of the inner circle of the lead of the global church. He is one of its founders. He's one of their champions. You have to know that going into watching his videos. Rob Renfro has long been an advocate of leaving the United Methodist Church before this. The unknowns about where we're going to be and all of those things, remember to keep this in mind. The United States is just one voice in what the United Methodist Church does, but it's still a worldwide church. And the big question on a lot of people's minds is, what is Africa going to do? Because the church in Africa is very conservative, more conservative than the Woodlands or Rob Renfro. There are many places in all of the countries in Africa where it's illegal to be gay. So the clergy certainly are not going to vote for it. The African church outnumbers us by a large amount. The African church is growing daily. The United States church is shrinking daily. The church in South America is very conservative. The church in Korea is very conservative. So as long as this vote is worldwide, the rapid swing to liberalism probably not going to happen. This is just Mike's opinion. Probably not going to happen. The question, maybe more to the point, is will we have bishops in the United States who just refuse to adhere to the rules? That's the real problem. Right now, the discipline in the United Methodist Church is very clear, crystal clear, about all these issues. The problem is we have bishops who choose not to follow them. Okay? That's the main issue. So could there be someday a Texas Annual Conference gets a bishop who chooses not to observe those rules? That's a possibility. I don't know. But that's really more of the rubber hit the road thing about that. In terms of cost, you're right. There is going to be a cost if we choose to leave. The unfunded pension liability, right now, that cost is zero because of some of the things that our annual conference has done, which is a big deal. That's zero. But you must remember, and I said this in our last get-together, that there will be a cost if we leave the United Methodist Church. The day that we become no more United Methodist, we give up everything that is proprietary to the United Methodist Church. The Cross and Flame, our church membership rolls, our charge conference information, our annual report information, our signage, our website, our articles of incorporation. Everything that was UMC is gone. And we start over as a new entity, which means new articles of incorporation, new website, new signage, new business cards, everything. Right?
It would require a certificate of formation going through. It would require a certificate of formation and the legal process to start a new corporation, basically, as you leave the United Methodist, because as of now, our charter is with the United Methodist Church. So there would be those legal costs of putting that system together, along with changing the deeds of all of our facilities. So the ownership would be whatever we decide to call ourselves upon leaving the United Methodist Church. So there would be some costs in that area.
So today, we have apportionments that we pay, right? And so last year, we paid in full. This year, we owe $13,226. Okay, so our cost of apportionment liability is very low. I know there was a reference to several $100,000, I think, John, that you referenced. We don't know where that cost of $300,000 came from in a larger church, but for FUMC and Liberty, it's just a little over $13,000, in addition to everything that the pastor mentioned, referencing collateral materials and things that would need to be changed if disaffiliation occurred. Sir?
Yes.
Yeah, that last year and this year, which last year the church has paid in full. So, and I think, if I remember right, that Liberty is already paid in full this year. So it would just be that remaining part for First Church. And the cost, the high numbers that were floating around previously would have been at the hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the unfunded pension liability. At annual conference, we voted to take the reserves that we have and apply that to the unfunded liability. And under the current market conditions, it covered the unfunded liability. That's why that's zero now. So that was a big thing for a lot of the churches. Otherwise, we would have been looking probably more than that to leave. We would have been maybe closer to $600,000. That's not a case anymore. That's zero.
At the very beginning of your talk, you said that it was irrelevant how we got here. Why do you say it's irrelevant how we got here?
It's irrelevant because we can't really control that. It happened the way it happened. I have my opinions about why it happened. I'm not very high on leadership in our church. There's 100 ways we could have handled this differently that would have been less damaging. But the way that they've handled it has brought us to this point, and we can't undo that. All we can do is move forward with the best possible way we can. There's nothing we can change about that. So I'm a person who thinks, let's look at the future and let's look at right now and see what we need to do. That's the best step we can take. That's all I mean by that. I've been openly critical about leadership and the UMC for some time. This issue has been brought before us for my whole career, and it's never gone away. And it could have been handled a long time ago. It could have been handled differently, but it wasn't. And just so you know, I have seen personally with my own eyes horrible behavior on both sides of this from people. Horrible, unchristian behavior on both sides of this argument.
While you're walking up, I wanted to share one thought. Give you plenty of time. Just take your time. So I'm the lay lead for the delegate for the church conference, along with Teresa Dunn. And so Teresa and Mike and I attended. Actually, Randy Dunn and Mike's wife also attended. I will share with you, this is the first time I've ever been present at a conference. And I will tell you that there was a lot more compassion and a lot less spewing of hatred, verbally or otherwise, than what I was a little concerned about and expected. So I will tell you that it was handled very professionally and very, very well, just here a couple of months at our conference. So I thought I would just share that with you. I think you would have all been proud. You might not necessarily agree with the context and the topic, but the manner in which it was presented was highly professional. Okay.
I also have kind of a two-part question. We talked about the cost, and you gave us the $13,000 and something. You also talked about other things, signage, business cards, the legal stuff. Are we currently pursuing what that is going to be? I mean, are we working on that if we're having a vote in September, October? And then secondly, I hate that it's a monetary thing that we use to make our decision. I'd like to know biblically what is in the Bible that tells us we should do, and that needs to be brought forth.
Anybody want to take that?
I'm not sure.
Well, that's a good one. Get ready, because I'm coming back to you like we do Children's Moment. But so I would share with you as I look at the differences between the United Methodist Church mission and the potential for the Global Methodist Church, that there's a lot more similarities than differences, okay? And in both cases, they're very biblically based. So the challenge that and I'm just giving you a layperson's perspective because I'm a layperson, is that when you have a rule, whether you're a bishop or you're a parent or a coach or a teacher, and you don't enforce the rules, challenges have and will continue to occur. We don't know what new leadership would look like from either Global nor United, but we have hope, right, that leadership would enforce rules as appropriate. That has not happened to date, okay? And that's one of the challenges, and this is, I'm just talking about here domestically. It's one of the challenges that's ultimately forcing us to have this very uncomfortable and quite honestly sad conversation. So hope that helps a little bit, Mike.
Just my experience has said that you would be wrong to think that going to the global church is going to cure all the ills. There are all humans. They are all frail and fallible humans, and there are going to be some problems there too. Right now, the UMC, the rules are the rules, and it's the bishops choosing not to follow the rules that's really the problem. And that's a minority of the bishops. One of the fears is, whether it's real or not, is that we'll have more of that. We'll have more bishops willing to not follow the rules than we have now. But in terms of the rules right now, and I said this, I think, at our last group meeting too, there's a reason why I am United Methodist. I believe that the United Methodist Church has it as close as anyone to being right. But there are things that the United Methodist Church does that are not biblical. There are things that the Southern Baptist Church does that are not biblical. There are things that the Catholic Church does that are not biblical. So if your hope is to find a church that's completely biblical, I don't think you'll find it. I really don't. You can argue with me about that, but I really don't. For example, does anybody know in the Bible that's where it says that professional clergy are the only ones that can bless communion? I haven't found it there. Is there anything in the Bible that says professional clergy are the only ones that can do a baptism? Right? Is there anything in the Bible that says you have to go to your priest for confession? Is there anything in the Bible that says you have to be baptized 49 times? I can argue with you about all of those things and quote the scripture for you too. Now, I try to do everything I do based on the Bible. That doesn't mean everybody, other clergy will. They clearly don't sometimes, right? So it's up to you. I've said this to you many times in the pulpit. How do you know what I'm telling you is really the right thing if you don't know, if you're not reading your Bible? And if you don't read your Bible and I'm not here, you can have the wool pulled over your eyes numerous times by what a clergy person says because you assume that they're right. And you'll make the same mistake if you assume that any body of religious entity is right in everything. They're not, period. They're not going to be right in everything. That's a fact. If we become independent and we make up our own rules, who's going to be around to make sure that the rules are followed? I mean, I can sit in Sunday school classes and hear things taught in Sunday school that are completely unbiblical. Anytime. I could pick a Sunday school class almost any time and go there and find things that are either not being said that should be said or things that are being said that are completely contrary to the Scripture. I don't know if that clarifies things for you or not, but it's not as black and white as it thinks. I am working on, though, the money part of it to get an idea about what it would cost. I mean, we know we just need to sit down and put our heads together, but we know we can find out how much signs will cost. We can find out how much, changing the website, the articles of incorporation, all that stuff we can calculate that real easy. That won't take long. The question for you to decide is, Do you want to do away with the cross and flame? Do you want to do away with the, if you're a lifelong United Methodist, do you want to give that up? Those kind of things, more personal things, I guess. I'm not going to lead you one way or the other to do that. But figuring out the costs that we have remaining, that's not hard. That's pretty easy.
I'm just taking it out.
I just wanted to know that when we have the vote, are we expected to vote at that time? If we decide to disaffiliate, do leadership expect us to vote on which way we're going? Or are we going to be able to have time to think about it after the vote?
Yes, that's a good question. We were just talking about that before we started. I think we would agree that we need 2 votes. One to, just so it's clear and simple, one to decide whether we want to disaffiliate, black and white, yes or no. Remember, 2/3 vote. And then that's the main pressure point. After that, we've got time. We've got time, probably even up until June of 2023. I'll clarify that, but we have time to decide which path we want to go to after that, and then have another vote for that. How we want to go forward. Okay, does that make sense? But the big vote would be whether or not we disaffiliate, and then we'll decide what we do. If we say no, then we're done. We'll just go on. If we say yes, we're going to disaffiliate, then we will decide, again, doing this process, what's our best path forward? What's your best path forward? Okay.
Let me just mention back on the biblical question. If you go to globalmethodist.org, you can link to the transitional book of discipline, doctrines and discipline of the church, and I think it's 47, 49 wonderful pages of reading. But if you go through that and you get down to the portions that's dealing with the biblical issues, I think you're going to find that they're very, very similar in the basic philosophy. So I haven't compared it one for one, but I didn't see anything in reading through there that shook me as some difference on the biblical side. Again, the main issues are homosexual, clergy, and so forth. So.
I think one of the major differences in the church on the issue of bishops, there is term limits on the bishops in the proposed Global Methodist Church. So they would not be lifelong appointments. There would be a shorter appointment. I think there's a pro and a con probably to that process as well. I think something else to look at is the organizational structure of the United Methodist Church and the organizational structure of the global church. I see little or no difference. I've read that discipline and tried to discern, but in neither of them are there accountability or checks and balances on the bishop, the role of the bishop in the church, as I can see in the proposed areas. Marianne?
All right. Well, I have several questions, like a novel. But so this is more a statement that I'd like you to address than a question. Because if the book of discipline could not have been changed because the conservatives were in the majority now, and the conservatives are pulling out of the United Methodist Church, isn't it possible that some of the discussions that have been put forward by the more liberal group that would make it an easier target, so to speak, to make those massive changes, those changes in the book of discipline? That's my first question. My second, but it's not really a question, it's kind of something to it. Oh, do one? Okay, do that.
Okay, so I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. About changes that the liberals might make in the discipline?
Yeah, I know you don't know what they might do, but what has been some of the things that have been discussed, and then you and I talked about kind of a second part of that, or a segue of that, is if Africa, South America, and Korea leave, then that is the other segment of conservatives. And anyway,
Yeah.
so, I mean,
The point you're making is about the future is really the hardest part of all of this.
I know.
Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the global church is going to do. They can change their rules again next year and the year after. They are still very much in the formation stages, and as much as they have done, which I think is pretty miraculous, they have that much or more to do. They're still negotiating pension and insurance. There's a lot of stuff that's not done yet there. And so for the United Methodist Church, again, it might change drastically in the year 2024, but the General Conference doesn't, they bow to no pressure. They can do whatever they want to. They don't answer to bishops. They don't answer to economies. They don't answer to politics. They can do whatever they want. And the conference that we have now is the conference that voted to keep the discipline the same and strengthen the rules about homosexuality, against homosexuality. That's where we stand right now with the General Conference we currently have. The gamble is that what if they do change it? Even if they don't change it in 2024, what if they change it in 2028, right? If the United States continues to become more and more progressive in their politics, you know, what's going to happen down the road? And nobody knows that. That's a gamble, okay? And again, if they do change it, then your next question to yourself is, what does that really, how does that affect us? I'm saying right now, where I sit, it wouldn't affect us really very much at all. Not in this area. My friend Jeff, the superintendent in the Woodlands, told me, I'm glad you are where you are, because it's not going to affect us like it is going to be Houston or Dallas or, you know, any major city. They're going to be ripped apart. We, on the other hand, don't have that burden here. So it's unknown. The possibility is there, but the possibility even is racked with questions. What if the African, you know, church does decide to leave and go global? Well, then the UMC could probably become very progressive, okay? But right now, at least 3 of the major bishops in Africa have decided that they're not going to do anything until 2024. They're just going to wait and see. 3 major conferences in Africa have said, we're just going to wait and see. The church in the United States does not have the massive vote. Africa does. So it's hard to imagine things really changing unless they vote for it. But Africa and South America and Korea and others, even China, could get to the point where they say, you know what, we're tired of dealing with you. You just go do what you want to do. We're not gonna play anymore. That's a possibility. Had we had conference with COVID hadn't hit in 2020, and we had annual conference, the wise thinking is that that's where they were. They were ready to just discontinue with UMC in the United States in general and go their own way. But after about 2021, 2020, early 2022, they started to change their minds and said, nah, I think we're going to wait and see. So we don't know, but there are all kinds of possible avenues that could go. We will not know until 2024.
so that brings me to my next question. If we don't disaffiliate now, do we have an opportunity later? Or would it cost substantially more, or would there be more penalties? Or would that completely lie entirely on the whims of whatever bishop, and if they were following the Book of Discipline, felt at the time?
That's a very good question. That's an excellent question. The reason that people are disaffiliating now is because of that question. We will get a new bishop in January. We don't know who that is going to be. Many of the conferences around the country are making it difficult to leave. Even when we do have an option to do that right now, they're making it very difficult to leave. They're being punitive in some cases for churches to try to leave and making it very expensive for them to leave. That's a possibility. That could change. Might not change. We don't know. But it's a possibility. That's why that's part of the gamble. That's why people are saying, we're not going to try that. We're not going to wait that long to see. We're just going to go ahead and decide now. Okay? And the same thing goes with annual conference. Right now, we have this disaffiliation process in place. There's no guarantee that after 2024 that window of disaffiliation will continue. Okay? It might not. That's another reason why people are feeling the pressure to act now rather than wait. Because if you do act now, then there's no issue. If you don't act now, you're rolling the dice and hoping that it doesn't change later. So if we get a liberal church or whatever, progressive church or not, still possible that they would close the loophole, take away that option for disaffiliation permanently. They might not. That's a gamble. We don't know.
Well, I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that I know the answer, because I have really fought with this. But some of these questions, I just keep going back and forth and I can't come up. I want to be sure too, and I don't think you've really actually said that here, that these people out here know that there is a possibility we would lose you. So I want you to address that.
Well, the clergy have their own problems in this, and their own discernment and their own decisions in this. A lot of questions, really. And I don't know what I'm going to do, to be fair and answer your question. But
I know, I just wanted them to hear that.
yeah.
Because I don't think everybody realizes that they would lose you. And you've been a real blessing to us.
So, I mean, there are numerous things for me to think about. Pension and insurance is definitely a big one. I've talked with many of you about that. That's one of the big questions, and how I go forward with this. The global church, I don't see this happening in my life, but it could happen. If I get crossways with a bunch of y'all and you said you're sick of Mike and you want me out of here, the global church looks at that and says, okay, let's just decide if Mike's effective in ministry. And if they decide I'm not effective in ministry, then they just boot me. Now, that cannot happen in the United Methodist Church. Under the current rules, that cannot happen. But it can in the global church.
We kind of can.
Huh?
We kind of can. Not boot you out entirely, but move you to a different
Boot me
firm.
out entirely.
Yeah.
The global church
Yeah.
can do
Oh,
that.
they can boot you out
They can
entirely.
do that right now under their rules. If they decide I'm not effective in ministry, I can be booted completely out.
Okay, I just misunderstood what you were saying.
United Methodist Church can't do that. They can appoint me to the Kuwait
Yeah.
First United Methodist Church, but they can't boot me completely. Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to be out of turn here, but on the question you raised, when you spoke to liberty,
Can you come to the mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're taping.
and I apologize for this, but at our Liberty meeting, you'd indicated in this regard that should you decide to leave the Methodist Church, it would impact your pension by a significant amount, right?
I'm still working on that answer. I don't think it's the amount that I first thought it was, but it's as near as I can tell about 7%. That's a complicated question. I'm trying to get Westpath to pin down and tell me exactly. It's based on the market conditions, probably why they're hesitant to tell me, because the market conditions could change this month and next month. So I may not get them to pin down exactly to what that is, but I think it's about 7%. I have alternatives for that. I could retire from the UMC and June of next year and roll my pension into Westpath and just leave it there and then continue on, not retire altogether, but just from the UMC. I have to figure out all of these options
Sure.
before we get to the decision.
What I wanted to add was that, just speculation here, is that my sister, who's belongs to this large Methodist church in Fringewood, I told her about that. She presented that question to her pastor there, and he told her that there would be absolutely no effect upon the pension for any pastor who left the Methodist church. So I don't know if that's
Yeah, I
makes
don't
it
think
more.
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb as chairman of the staff parish committee a little bit, but I think a part of our decision is making absolutely certain that Mike Cline remain as our pastor, and I think a part of the expense of this process is making certain that we can put the kind of retirement effort together and the costs that it might cost to a pastor as we leave, if we leave the United Methodist Church. We've got to be very concerned about our staff, that we can provide health insurance, that we can do some of the additional costs that now are afforded through the United Methodist Church. And so personally, I think that's some of our committee's responsibility. Many of you are here. If you feel different, feel free to say, but we're moving this church forward at the present time. I think both churches are moving forward at the present time, and we have a brilliant future under his leadership, and I hope we can just maintain and protect that.
Okay.
So here's one of the reasons why I've been very standoffish about answering that question, and it's a serious reason. I won't be here forever. Okay, I'm 62 years old, so my legal retirement age, with Social Security, is 67. I don't know if I would retire at 67 or not, but the point is that at some point I'm not going to be your pastor, and the decision you make right now is going to affect that. So if you're basing your decision upon the pastor you have right now, then you're being foolish. You need to be making your decision on the future and who your pastor might be or how you get that pastor. Yeah. And when I said that there's a downside to every single one of these choices, one of them is going to be how it affects the clergy. Because, and if I was in charge of up on high, or if I was king for a day, I would have a long time ago set up a few columns and inventoried all the clergy and said, you want to be UMC, you want to be global, you want to be independent. So I knew what I had going forward, because once the dust settles for all of this, when it's just going to be years, okay? Lawsuits, legal problems, this is going to be years before. This is not just going to go away. It's not. I hate to tell you. There are lawsuits in the United Methodist Church as we speak. Those bishops who have decided to be punitive are being sued by multiple churches in multiple places in our country. The Judicial Council is still ruling on things that, as we speak, that they haven't come out and decided on. These things are they're ongoing, and they're going to be ongoing. But the question is going to be, where is your clergy going to come from next? Okay? So, when we become whatever we're going to be, if we stay United Methodist Church, all those pastors who are going global are no longer available. So the pool of your clergy options is reduced. If we decide we're going to go global, well, all the UMC pastors that decide to stay UMC are out of the picture now. And your pool of clergy has been reduced. And while this charge together offers one of the better packages around for a town this size, you're still going to be swimming upstream versus Friendswood or, some of those really big Methodist churches, the Woodlands, etc. So, and again, if you go independent, same thing. You're going to have to find your pastor on your own. You're going to have to discern who that is. Is that person you like? Is that a person that will lead you and challenge you and take you where you need to be? Those are the questions you should be thinking about right now. Because no matter what you do, I won't be here forever. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth. You know, this, as much as it's affecting our bishop, and as heartbroken as he is, I'm just as heartbroken about the fact that we're even have to do this. Because if you don't know by now, I think you should be the church. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm doing this because I want you to be the church. I want to see you be the church in the world. That should be abundantly clear to you by now. That's where I stand. And it's heartbreaking that we have to even deal with this at all, because this is a distraction from that. If I had enough money in the pile in my bank account, I would have retired already. I would be in Denver, Colorado, climbing mountains every day. That's where I would be, because I wouldn't have to deal with this. That's the honest truth. I don't know what my path is. I pray about it constantly. I don't know what's going to happen with me, but your decision needs to be based. I'm going to do everything I've been doing and all I can do for you while I'm with you, but you have to face the fact that someday, no matter what you do now, you're going to have this decision before you about how the clergy is going to help you or not help you. And I don't think we have a lot of control over that. It's just a fact. It's going to come. Yeah.
Okay, so this is my last one. I have more, but I'm not going to tell. But, and I think we all know that we should make this decision based on, number one, the Bible, and number two, what we should be as the church. And because we know you're just here today, gone tomorrow. We know that. We have also been the church and stood up when there were pastors here that were not pastoring or were not able to whatever. So I think we have stood up when we had to. But, and I think we will again. The last question I had is dealing with the bishop, the current bishop, and the situation and how he was not planning to retire and then suddenly he was planning to retire, and some of the things that happened that caused that retirement. Because to me, that's kind of an omen of maybe things, the way things could go in the future.
I don't know if I'd read too much into that. Scott, he was ready to retire. I think this is ripping him apart. He didn't like this. He didn't want this to happen. Didn't want us to get to this place. I think he was convinced to stay on until 2024 to help make things more smooth, and he bowed into that pressure at annual conference. The Wednesday morning, last day of annual conference, he agreed to stay on, announced it to us all, and one other bishop did the same thing in our jurisdiction. But it wasn't more than maybe a month that he came out and said, "Nah, not going to do it. He's going to go ahead and retire." Scott has been in the church for a long time. Certainly he's able to retire very comfortably. His wife, if you don't know this, owns her own company that's very successful. They have more than they'll ever need to retire. He's had some health problems. His back, his if you were with us at Lakeview, you'd have seen he could barely move to get off of the altar down to the chair. And he's better now, but there's a lot of reasons why he would just want to throw up his hands and say, "I don't want to do it anymore." You know, so I wouldn't read anything political into that. I don't think that's the case. He's seen the worst of it. I would say that he's seen the worst behavior from both sides, which is heartbreaking to anybody that cares about the church. He's seen the worst of the worst from both sides, but I don't think there's any political. The question is, who's our next bishop going to be? That's really the bigger question, and what's that bishop going to be like? They have their own problems, because up right now, the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church is probably one of the strongest conferences in the whole church worldwide. It's maybe even in the top 10 strongest conferences in the whole world. But what's going to be left when this is all done, right? If circumstances were the same, then we would get a very strong bishop because we are a very strong conference. We would get a bishop that probably is strong enough and administrative enough to handle this conference. But then with all the changes, there will have to be a realignment. All the districts will have to realign everywhere. And then the question to the bishop is, well, what's going to be left over for me? You know, is it going to be 700 churches like what we have now, or is it going to be 300 churches? And, you know, or then are they going to combine different conferences together? And so now then Dallas and Houston area is all one conference under one bishop. Is it a conservative bishop, liberal bishop, moderate bishop? There's all kinds of questions we can't answer right now.
I'm new to the Methodist Church. I was born and raised into Disciples of Christ, and for 30 years For 30 years I was a member of First Christian Church in Plano, Texas, and we hire our own ministers. We ended up hiring a minister who wasn't completely honest with us, and he ended up going towards the gay side. And I can't listen to a minister that doesn't believe in the scriptures as is. At any rate, so I went to the Baptist church, and because they were following the scriptures closer than anybody else that I knew, I moved down here and became Methodist. I love Liberty Methodist Church. My son, as you know, is working towards becoming ordained. He went to TCU as he was trying to get his degree and found that it was very liberal. They were almost shouted down by homosexuals, and so he didn't go there. My concern is a lot of the colleges now, whether it be Christian or whatever, are going more liberal. If we stay and you have a liberal bishop, you don't have the choice of what minister you get. You're more likely to get more liberal ministers in the United. So I don't know what choices you're going to have in the global as far as what ministers you have and how long they stay or whatever. But if it's definitely conservative, you're less likely to have one that you're more in agreement with, for what it's worth.
Yeah, good point. I think several thoughts. I'll try to be brief. We live in a relatively conservative part of the world. We live in a relatively conservative part of Texas. So that is known. What I want is I want us to be a loving church. Who here is without sin? No hand should go up. So my point is that what are we called to do? We're called to live Christ-like, right? What does the Bible say? Do I fail? Yep. So that's the first thing. I would say that there's so many unknowns, right? The last 3 years have been a fog between a pandemic and this horrible topic that we're even having to bring before you today, right? But it's up to you and it's up to me to be loving and to be willing to pray and seek wisdom from the Lord on how we want to move forward. And we don't need to tarry. So we need to be in prayer and we need to be in Scripture right now so that we can make a decision that we feel like is not based upon what Mike is trying to say or influence or anyone else here at this table. That is not the goal. The goal is to simply educate and inform today, right? And ultimately, we want you to use wisdom. And you can get that if you ask, because the Bible is very clear about praying for wisdom and it will be granted, okay? So that's what I wanted to share with you. I appreciate Mike. He has told me personally, he's told all of you and anyone that's talked to him, he doesn't know about what tomorrow holds, but I guarantee he knows who holds tomorrow. And I'd like Mike to stay until he's 72 and forget that whole 67 eligible for retirement guard personally, but he won't, right? He simply won't. So we need to remember we're the church. Mike's not really the church. We love him and his leadership, but we are the church, okay? So here's what I'm thinking. If we want Mike to stay or anyone else to come that would meet certain criteria that we would want, then we need to be growing this church, right? And so what does that look like? Asking, what do we hear him say? Talk to the people that are checking you out at the grocery store and invite them. We need more people here. We need more young people. We need more kids, okay? So we can get really relaxed and comfortable and just have like a family reunion every Sunday, or we can stretch ourselves, and that's the challenge for me, and it's the challenge for you. And I'll get off my soapbox.
And that's really exactly what I would say to that question. Many of you can't tell by now, many of these things that are happening with regardless of what you decide. They're happening regardless of what you do or your choice. They're going to happen. They're going to have a downside to every choice we make. And it's going to come to you whether you like it or not. If in a perfect world, my desire for you, my desire for this church, both of them, is that you be the church. Because that's really all that matters. You be the church that we've been called to be, and be Christian and Christ-like as your church. That is your best solution. If you get a liberal clergy person here, they might try to, just imagine the worst case scenario, okay? This probably already happened to you. I feel pretty certain that many of you have already seen this happen to you. Well, that doesn't mean that much. That doesn't mean you have to become something you're not. If you're being the church, be the church. If you're loving your neighbor as yourself, love your neighbor as yourself. If you're inviting people to the church, you don't have to teach them that, you want to be gay or not gay or whatever. Be the church. Love them patiently, teach them, help them see Christ. I've said this numerous times in the pulpit. When people see Christ, they are transformed. They will become Christ-like themselves. That's your goal. If you want the church to be a biblical church, then you should know what that is. And you should help people learn to see what that is. And then the problem solved. If the people become Christ-like, and the people you're teaching become Christ-like, then they become disciples. And the problem is no longer a big problem. It's when we decide not to be the church that we get problems. It's when we decide to be political church or make politics our idol. That's when we have a problem. God is not going to honor that, ever. But if you're loving your neighbor as yourself, you're being Christ-like in this world, God will honor that. I have no doubt.
I just have kind of a simple question. First of all, of course, this is my opinion that I don't feel like we're leaning toward independent. But how many churches have disaffiliated to this point that you know of?
To be honest with you, I've never been one of these people that keeps up with the whole world of churches. I really don't have time for that. Plenty of my colleagues do nothing but that, keeping track of every move and following all that. I don't do that. Just from, things that happen to fall in my lap, I know of several churches that are going to disaffiliate. Dayspring and Tyler is going to, very conservative church. The Woodlands, where Rob Renfro came from, obviously a very global oriented church. They've already agreed to. Several churches down there have agreed to. We just found out the other day that Golden and Smith Chapel agreed to go global, but I don't really know much more than that. There are clearly there are churches that are disaffiliating because the bishop called this conference leadership staff retreat with all the superintendents for next week to talk about how they will realign with what's left. I just don't know how many. Any other questions? We're about a little over an hour into this. Okay.
Don't forget, God loves all of his children. Amen. I think we forget that. Mike, what would happen if we just stay like we are? I've been in a Methodist for 96 years, and it's sure hard for me to go any other way. And if you decide to leave, I'm going to put a brick on your head.
I already have enough problems. I don't.
I think I'm one of them.
You are not. You are definitely not one of them. I'm very proud of what you do.
Thank you, darling.
I wish we had more like you. Willing to go and get your neighbor and take them for groceries. That's about as Christ-like as you can be. I'm obviously going to lean that way if you don't know me. If you don't know me at all, if you don't see that in me. If we're loving our neighbor and we're doing those things, there's nothing that will change. I mean, that's what we should be. If you think that this is the only outside influence that's going to come your way, you're wrong. I don't know how much you believe or what you think about, but evil in this world is going to target a church that is being a church, Christ-like in their work. Evil in this world will target that and try to prevent you from being that. That's very biblical. That's factual. It's happened numerous times in my life, personally to me, and it will continue to. That's part of being a Christ follower in this world. Evil is at hand when we're doing the work of Christ. But evil does not have any power against Christ. And we have to remember that. There's no better path to choose than following Christ in the world and being Christ-like in the world. We're safe if we do that. We're safe if we pick that route. Because in that route, we're protected by God, by the Holy Spirit, by the power of good in this world. Period.
I want to kind of reiterate, Mike mentioned earlier the September the 30th, the pension liability is zero. That will be recalculated as of October 1. I think that'll go through December. I think they're going to recalculate that each quarter. We don't know if it'll change or not. It probably won't change that much. But what we're talking about, and the reason I think we're having some of these meetings, is because the disaffiliation timeline is about whether you own whether we take our property with us, and how much it costs to get out. Unfortunately, there's not much biblical about that, which is frustrating, but that's what it comes down to, because it gradually changes, and I think, as Mike said, at the end of 2024, that provision is gone. It will change over time, it looks like. But anyway, that's part of it. Is basically probably up until 2024 you can disaffiliate anytime you want to, but the question is, you can walk away. We could all walk away, but you're walking away from the property and what the church owns right now. So, as Mike said, there's no easy decisions, and having a pastor that we all love even complicates that worse. And he's got a difficult situation that he's been put into, and no fault of his or ours, but it definitely is going to affect all of us as we have to make these decisions and decide how we're going to go forward.
Okay, any other questions? My thinking is, I've talked to some of these guys. My thinking is that we'll have another one of these just to see if we've had any more conversation that we need to have. Sunday school classes certainly can take this up and talk. Please, if you have questions about this, just walk into my office and ask me. You don't have to be fancy about that. My door is never closed. You can come in and just ask me whatever you want to, and I'll be bluntly and clearly honest with you about whatever I know. We'll have another Q&A session to see if there's anything remaining, and then we'll set another date where we can all get together and vote. Probably, I feel certain that the superintendent would be here with us to run that at that time, so that the vote's not, done by me or any of us, but we'll have an outside leader to do that. And remember, that's 2/3 vote by professing members. Okay, we have people, I'm sure, that have been visiting for years but have never joined. They would not have a vote. Only professing members would have a vote.
Only 2/3 of those present.
2/3 of those present can vote.
So somebody doesn't choose to vote, they don't take up any part of that.
Yeah, if you're not here, you can't vote. Just so you know, the Book of Discipline is pretty clear. Any duly called and announced meeting, whoever's there is a quorum. So if we have 10 people show up, well, that's it. That's 10 people. That's a quorum. We'll have the vote. If we have 100 people show up, we'll have the vote with 100 people. Okay? Yeah, no proxies. Sorry. And I do not have a vote. Okay? I'm not steering you one way or the other. I won't. I don't think that's professional, and I don't think that's what a leader should do. All right? Well, all right. We'll have a video of this on the website, or is it on YouTube, or where are we going to put this?
The church has a YouTube channel, and we'll have this video up on YouTube probably late today or certainly by tomorrow afternoon. So it shouldn't take too much editing. Usually we just have to mess with the sound a little bit to boost it up here or there. So it'll be up there. I have one other thing I want to mention before we go away. The past 3 weeks, we had a program with our church and the Rotary Club of Quitman to feed children that come from families that it would put a strain on them. So we fed a total of 68 families, which is right at 200 kids, and it's those 200 kids got about 400 meals with the program that we had in place. Unfortunately, we were equipped to feed a lot more of that. So my point is we have Lunchables for sale, for $2 a piece. So if you'd like a Lunchable, see me after this meeting's over. Thanks for the commercial.
And if you don't buy those Lunchables, you're going to get them for communion next month. So, all right, appreciate Sam. Sam, that's the one you really want to make sure you keep here, Sam, because he works way, way above and beyond to get all these things done.
For example, he just said he'll have this up tonight or tomorrow. If he would have said this will be up by Tuesday, would anyone have been mad at Sam? No. But you know what happens is he I think overpromises and he still overdelivers. There you go.
Yeah, Monday would have been okay too. But all right. Well, thank you for coming. I'm glad that you're here. remember that you can find all this information on our website. You can find more information on some of the other things we've mentioned. There are plenty of videos out there. If you see something you're not sure about, ask, because there is plenty of bad information out there. Plenty. Please ask if you do. Okay. All right. We'll go in peace. We're a little longer than I thought, but I hope it's productive for you. Okay. And I'll see you tomorrow.